I found a locked box in my husband's study, and it shattered everything I thought I knew. My children, my own flesh and blood, it kept his secret for years. It was a Tuesday morning, gray and heavy, the kind of day in Portland where the rain doesn't fall but hangs in the air like a promise. I was 74, sifting through Roland's old desk, looking for a spare key to the shed. My hands brushed against a small metal box tucked behind a stack of yellowed manuals. It was cold, heavier than it looked, with a tiny lock that clicked open like a confession. Inside, a will. His will, dated 8 years before he died. Our $750,000 home on Hawthorne Street, the savings we scraped together over 45 years, even the cedar chest I'd inherited from my grandmother, went to a woman named Cassandra Bright. A name I'd never heard, a stranger who'd stolen my life on paper. But the real wound wasn't the will, it was the signatures at the bottom. Lila Voss, Ethan Voss, my daughter and son. They'd stood beside their father, watched him erase me, and said nothing. My knees buckled. I sank to the floor, the box still in my hands, its edges biting into my palms. The room spun, not with dizziness, but with the weight of a truth I hadn't seen coming. 45 years of cooking his favorite pot roast, of bandaging their scraped knees, of staying up late to balance our checkbook while he slept, gone. Reduced to a few pages in his precise, slanted handwriting. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just sat there, the box open like a wound, and let the silence scream. That night, I couldn't sleep. I wandered the house, touching things I'd taken for granted. The chipped mug he drank from every morning, the quilt we'd argued over when the winters got too cold. Each one felt like a lie now, a prop in a play I didn't know I was performing. At 20:37 a.m., I found something else in the box, a diary, Roland's. Pages filled with his thoughts, his justifications. He'd written that I was distant, unloving, a woman who'd left him lonely in our marriage. My breath caught, sharp as a blade. Unloving? I'd given him everything, my youth, my dreams, my silence when his temper flared. I'd been the one to hold our family together, stitch by stitch, while he built a story where I was the villain. I texted Lila. Found something of Dad's. Can we talk? Her reply came too fast, like she'd been waiting for this moment. Mom, don't jump to conclusions. It's not what it seems. But it was exactly what it seemed. Her words were a flimsy bandage on a wound she'd helped cut. I'm Elowen Voss, and this is the story of how I lost everything I thought was mine, and how I fought to take it back. If you've ever been betrayed by the people you loved most, stay with me. This isn't just my story, it's a mirror for anyone who's felt erased. Hit that like button if you've ever been blindsided by family. Share this with someone who needs to know they're not alone. And comment below, when did you discover a truth that changed everything? I stood in my kitchen at dawn, the light slanting through the blinds like it was trying to confess something. The house on Hawthorne Street, my home for 45 years, felt like a stranger's now. The diary lay open on the counter, Roland's words accusing me of being unloving, a woman who'd left him lonely. I traced the ink with my finger, as if touching it could make it less real. I'd spent decades cooking his meals, mending his shirts, waiting up when he worked late at the lumber yard. Unloving. The word burned, a quiet fire that licked at everything I thought I was. I poured coffee, the kettles hissed too loud in the stillness. My hands shook, not from age, but from the betrayal that had settled into my bones. Lila's text from last night glowed on my phone, her words flimsy as tissue paper. Don't jump to conclusions. I wanted to laugh, but it caught in my throat, dry and sharp. I wandered the house, touching things that used to mean something. The dining table where we'd carved pumpkins with the kids. The bookshelf sagging under Roland's old mysteries. Each one mocked me now, props in a life I'd built for someone else. I stopped at the mirror in the hall, my face unfamiliar under the weight of 74 years. My eyes, though, knew not hope, not yet. Rage, maybe. Or the beginning of it. I called Lila at 7 a.m. Her voice was cautious, like she was stepping around broken glass. Mom, you okay? I didn't answer that. You signed the will, Lila, you and Ethan. Why didn't you tell me? A pause long enough to drown in. It was years ago, she said finally. We didn't think it mattered. Didn't think it mattered. My home, my savings, my life, handed to a woman named Cassandra Bright, and it didn't matter. I pressed harder. Who's Cassandra? Another pause, heavier this time. She was someone Dad knew, from his support group after the diagnosis. Her voice cracked, and for a moment I saw the girl who used to cry when her kite got stuck in a tree. But that girl was gone, replaced by a woman who'd chosen her father's lies over me. I hung up before she could say more. The phone felt hot in my hand, like it carried her excuses. I didn't want them. I wanted the truth, raw and unfiltered, but Lila had buried it somewhere I couldn't reach. I sat at the kitchen table, the diary still open, its pages curling slightly at the edges. Roland's handwriting was so familiar, the same script he'd used for grocery lists, birthday cards, notes left on the fridge. Now it was a weapon, each word a cut. I drove to the lawyer's office on Burnside, the same one we'd used for our first will back in '79. The building hadn't changed, peeling paint, a creaky elevator that smelled of mildew. The receptionist, young and nervous, recognized my name. Mrs. Voss, she said like it was a question. I nodded, feeling the weight of that title. Mrs. Voss, Roland's wife, Lila and Ethan's mother. Labels that used to hold me together, now fraying at the seams. The lawyer, a man too young to know our history, flipped through the file with a practiced frown. It's valid, he said. Signed, witnessed, notarized. I'm sorry. Sorry. The word landed like a pebble in a pond, ripples fading fast. Can I fight it? I asked. He shrugged a lawyer's shrug, polished and empty, only with evidence of fraud or incapacity. 8 years ago, he was sound. I left with a copy of the will and a knot in my chest that wouldn't loosen. Back home, I stood in the backyard, the grass damp under my shoes. The apple tree Roland planted when Ethan was born leaned tiredly against its stake. I'd tended it, pruned it, picked its fruit for pies no one thanked me for. Now it felt like his tree, not ours. I wanted to rip it out, roots and all, but I didn't. Not yet. I wasn't ready to let the rage win. That night, I dreamed of Roland. He was standing in the kitchen, smiling like he used to before the cancer ate him away. You were enough, he said, but his voice was wrong, hollow, like wind through a cracked window. I woke up gasping, the diary still on the nightstand, its lies louder than his dream words. I didn't sleep again. By morning, I was someone else. Not stronger, not yet, but harder, like clay left too long in the sun. I made tea, the ritual grounding me, the steam curling like a question I couldn't answer. Who was I, if not the woman who'd loved them all so fiercely they thought they could take it for granted? I didn't know. But I was going to find out. If you're still here, you know what it's like to carry a hurt so deep it changes your shape. Keep watching. This is how I started to carve myself back into being. The morning after the lawyer's office, I woke to a house that felt borrowed. The light in Portland was thin, slicing through the curtains like a warning. I stood at the sink, washing a single plate, the one with the faint blue flowers Roland always used for toast. My hands moved mechanically, but my mind was caught on his letter, found in the same box as the diary. We built this together. He'd written before his first surgery, the ink smudged from his shaky hand. Together. The word mocked me now, clashing with the diary's accusations of my coldness. I drove to Lila's house on Alberta Street, unannounced. The street was quiet, lined with craftsmen bungalows and bicycles chained to porches. Her home was tidy, the white siding gleaming under the gray sky. I'd helped paint it one summer, sweat stinging my eyes, Lila laughing as she smudged paint on my cheek. Now, I stood on the sidewalk, a stranger to my own daughter's world. Through the window, I saw their silhouettes, Lila and Ethan laughing, clinking glasses. The ease of it cut deeper than the will itself. They were whole, untouched by the betrayal they'd helped write. I didn't knock. I just watched, my breath fogging in the cold, my heart a heavy stone. I was outside my own blood, an exile in a story I'd spent decades shaping. Back home, I pulled the letter from the box again. Roland's words promised a shared life, a vow etched in blue ink. But the diary told a different story. Me, distant, unloving, a woman who'd failed him. The contradiction gnawed at me. Had he regretted the will? Had he meant to change it before the cancer won? I folded the letter carefully, as if it could still hold answers. I called Ethan that afternoon. His voice was too bright, like he was selling something. Mom, you good? I ignored the question. Tell me about Cassandra Bright. A pause, the kind that carries weight. She was just someone Dad met at the hospital. A friend. A friend. The word was a lie dressed in casual clothes. A friend who gets our home. Everything. My voice was steady, but it carried an edge I didn't recognize. He sighed, exasperated. We didn't think she'd actually take it, Mom. We were kids. Kids. Ethan was 27 when he signed, Lila 30. They weren't children. You knew? I said. You watched him erase me. He didn't deny it. We thought you'd be fine. You're tough. Tough, as if strength was a consolation for being discarded. I hung up, the phone heavy in my hand. The house was too quiet, the kind of silence that presses against your skin. I walked to the backyard where the apple tree sagged under its own weight. I'd always loved its crooked branches, the way it bloomed despite neglect. Now it felt like Roland's, a monument to his lies. I wanted to tear it down, but I didn't. Rage wasn't my plan. Not yet. I opened the diary again, flipping to a new page. Roland had written about a dinner we'd had years ago, one I remembered for its laughter, for the way he'd squeezed my hand under the table. In his version, I was distracted, cold, barely there. The memory twisted, reshaped by his words. Had I been cold? Or had he needed me to be, to justify his choices? By evening, I was at the kitchen table, the will and diary side by side. The letter lay between them, a fragile bridge between two truths. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat, letting the weight of it all settle. I was 74, and for the first time, I saw the shape of my own absence in their story. But I wasn't gone. Not yet. The rain had stopped, but the air in Portland clung to my skin, damp and heavy. I stood outside Cassandra Bright's bungalow, my shoes sinking slightly into the wet earth of her lavender-lined path. Her house was small, tucked into a quiet cold sack off Belmont Street. A stained glass window caught the weak sunlight, casting flecks of red and gold onto the porch. A mailbox shaped like a birdhouse stood at the curb, painted with ivy that seemed to grow in the morning's haze. It was the kind of place that whispered peace, and it made my stomach churn. I'd come uninvited, driven by a need I couldn't name. Not to accuse, not yet, but to see her world, to understand what Roland had chosen over me. The lavender's scent was sharp, almost mocking, as I lingered by the gate. A wind chime tinkled softly, its notes too gentle for the storm inside me. I didn't ring the bell. I just stood there, a woman unmoored, studying the life my husband had written into his will. That morning, I'd called Ethan again. His voice was clipped like he was late for something. Mom, you don't need to do this? Do what? I thought. Exist. Tell me about Cassandra, I said, my tone flat but unyielding. He hesitated, then let it spill. She was in Dad's support group. They talked a lot when he was sick. It wasn't what you think. Not an affair, he meant. Not physical. But the words landed like a confession of something deeper, an emotional theft I hadn't seen coming. I pressed my palm against the gate's cold metal. You signed the will, Ethan? You knew? His sigh was heavy, impatient. I thought it was just talk, Mom. Dad said you'd be fine, that you didn't need the house. Didn't need it? The house where I'd raised him, where I'd scrubbed floors and hung curtains, where I'd stayed up nights worrying over his fevers. I hung up without another word, the silence sharper than any argument. Back home, Lila came over that evening, letting herself in with the key I hadn't asked for back. She stood in the kitchen, arms crossed, her face a mix of guilt and defiance. Mom, you went to her house, she said, like I'd crossed a line. I laughed, a dry, bitter sound. You signed away my life, Lila. You don't get to judge where I walk. Her eyes flickered, but she didn't back down. Dad said you were strong, that you'd always land on your feet. Strong. The word was a blade, cutting through years of quiet sacrifices. I'd been strong when Roland forgot anniversaries, when I worked extra shifts to pay for Lila's art classes, when I smiled through Ethan's sullen teenage years. Strength wasn't a gift, it was a weight I'd carried alone. You think this is about me being strong? I said, my voice low. He left me nothing, Lila. And you let him. She looked away, her fingers twisting the hem of her sweater. It wasn't about you, Mom. Dad was lonely. Cassandra was there. Lonely. Another lie. I saw Roland's diary in my mind, his words painting me as cold, distant. Had he told them that too? Had my children believed I was someone who deserved to be erased? I didn't ask her to leave. I just turned back to the sink, washing a mug that didn't need washing. Lila stood there a moment longer, then slipped out, the door clicking softly behind her. The house settled into its quiet, but it wasn't empty. It was heavy with truths I was only beginning to name. I looked out the window at the apple tree, its branches bare and crooked. I wasn't ready to confront Cassandra yet, but I was ready to stop running from the truth. The lawyer's office smelled of polished wood and old coffee, a place where promises were filed away like receipts. I sat across from Tara, my new attorney, her sharp eyes scanning the will I'd brought, its pages worn from my sleepless nights. Tara leaned back, her pen tapping the desk, a rhythm that steadied me. "There's a clause," she said, her voice low, deliberate. Paragraph 7. If Cassandra Bright refuses the inheritance or fails to claim it within 6 months, it reverts to the secondary beneficiary. She slid the paper toward me, my name in faded ink at the bottom, Elowen Voss. An afterthought, but there, my breath caught not with hope, but with possibility. The house on Hawthorne 50,000 life Roland had tried to give away could still be mine. "So, if she walks away," I said. Tara nodded, a faint smile breaking her professional mask. "Exactly. But you'll need to talk to her. Face to face." I drove to Cassandra's bungalow that afternoon, the Portland sky heavy with clouds that refused to break. My hands were steady on the wheel, but my heart beat unevenly, like a drum out of time. I parked a block away, watching her house from a distance. The lavender garden was still there, the stained glass window glinting like a secret. I rang the bell, my pulse loud in my ears. Cassandra opened the door, older than I'd imagined, her silver hair pulled back, her eyes soft but wary. She was in her late 60s, dressed in a linen blouse, a simple gold chain at her neck. "Elowen," she said, "not a question." I nodded. "You know why I'm here." She stepped aside. "Come in." Coffee. Her living room was warm, cluttered with books and candles, a violin case in the corner. No photos of Roland, no trace of him. We sat, mugs steaming between us. I didn't know about the will. She said, her voice calm, like she'd rehearsed it. "Not until the lawyer called last week." I waited, letting her words settle. "You were close to him," I said, not accusing, just needing the shape of it. She looked at her hands, folded neatly in her lap. "For a time, yes. At the hospital support group, he said you'd grown apart, that you were cold, cold." The word from his diary, now spoken aloud, stung like a slap. I laughed, short and harsh. "He told me the same about you." Played us both. Her eyes met mine, and for a moment we were mirrors, reflecting the same betrayal. She pulled a letter from a drawer, her hands trembling slightly. "He wrote this to me before he died. Said he felt guilty, that he'd wronged you." I took the paper, Roland's handwriting jagged, hurried. "I made a mistake. He'd written, Elowen deserved better." My throat tightened. The letter I'd found said the same, a twin confession he'd never spoken aloud. "I'm not here to beg," I said, folding the letter. "I'm asking you to refuse the inheritance. Let it revert to me." She didn't flinch. "And if I don't?" Her voice was steady but not cruel. "I'll fight," I said. "In court, in public, every way I can. But if you walk away, you keep your dignity. We both do." She stood, walked to the window, the light framing her like a painting. "He said you'd outlast us all?" she murmured. We sat in silence, the coffee cooling between us. Then she nodded. "I'll sign the refusal, no strings." Her words were a door closing, not on anger, but on a chapter neither of us had chosen. I left her house with a promise and something heavier. Respect, maybe, for a woman who'd been lied to as much as I had. That night, I slept, not deeply, but enough to dream of a house that might still be mine. The morning after Cassandra's promise, I stood in my kitchen, the Portland light filtering through the blinds like a hesitant guest. The house on Hawthorne Street, once a monument to my marriage, felt like a borrowed coat, too heavy and ill-fitting. I called Lila, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. Cassandra's signing the refusal, I said. The house comes back to me. Silence stretched across the line, thick with her unspoken guilt. That's good, Mom, she managed, her words brittle. You don't have to pretend relief, I said. It's too late for that. She started to speak, but I cut her off. No excuses, Lila. I needed truth, and you gave me silence. I hung up, the phone cold in my hand. The quiet that followed wasn't empty. It was mine, a space I was learning to claim. I drove to Tara's office, the lawyer who'd found the clause. She handed me a stack of forms, her eyes sharp but kind. We'll set up a trust, she said, for your granddaughter, Nora. Everything, house, savings, the works. I nodded, and my children. Tara's pen paused. They get nothing unless you say otherwise. I looked at her, unflinching. They get reminders. Back home, I pulled out old bank records from a drawer, dusty and creased. Loans I'd given Lila for her art studio, money Ethan borrowed for his car, sums I'd never chased because love, I thought, meant letting go. I made copies, stapled them into 2 folders, not to demand repayment, but to show them what my trust had cost. I labeled them in black ink debts unpaid. That afternoon, Nora came over, her tote bag slung over her shoulder, her eyes bright but wary. She was 19, all sharp edges and soft questions, like her mother used to be. We sat at the dining table, the folders between us. Grandma, she said, hesitating, I found something. She pulled out her phone, played a recording, her voice low. Lila and Ethan, talking late at night, their words caught like flies in amber. We should have told her, Lila said. Dad made us promise, but it was wrong. Ethan's reply was softer, guilty. She'll never forgive us. I closed my eyes, the recording a blade and a bomb. They knew. They'd always known, and their guilt was real, but it hadn't been enough to make them speak. Nora watched me, waiting. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, she said. I just wanted you to know. I took her hand, her fingers warm against mine. You gave me truth, I said. That's more than they did. That evening, I called Miriam, a friend I hadn't seen since Roland's funeral. Her voice was warm, like slipping into an old sweater. Elowen, you sound different, she said. I told her everything, the will, the diary, the recording. She listened, her silence the kind that holds you up. You've been carrying them all, she said. It's time to carry yourself. She was right. I'd spent decades being the scaffolding for their lives, invisible until it cracked. I invited Lila and Ethan over the next day. They arrived together, Lila's arms crossed, Ethan lingering by the door. I slid the folders across the table. These are yours, I said. Not to pay back, to remember. Lila's face tightened, but she didn't open hers. His jaw set. You're cutting us off, he said. Not a question. No, I said. I'm cutting the cord. You've been tethered to my silence long enough. They left without a word, the folders in their hands like stones. I stood in the doorway, watching them drive away. The house was quiet, but it wasn't lonely. It was the quiet of a woman learning to stand without leaning. The real estate agent's heels clicked on the hardwood as she walked through my Hawthorne Street house. Her clipboard tucked under her arm like a verdict. I'd called her to sell, to let go of the $750,000 weight that had anchored me to Roland's lies. Stephanie was young, her voice bright but not pushy, her eyes scanning the sagging couch, the chipped molding, the life I'd built and lost. You sure? She asked, pausing by the kitchen window where the apple tree leaned into view. Yes, I said, my voice steady, final. It's time. She nodded, jotting something down, and I felt the house exhale as if it knew it was being released. The sale was quick. A young couple, expecting their first child, offered full price. I didn't counter, didn't haggle. I signed the papers on a Tuesday, the ink drying under a gray Portland sky. I packed slowly, one drawer at a time, giving away Roland's old sweaters, the china we'd never used, the curtains I'd sewn when Lila was a baby. I kept 3 books, a kettle and a box of photos labeled mine. Pictures of me before him, laughing with friends, standing alone on a cliff in '73, the wind in my hair. I moved to a small apartment on Belmont, A top-floor unit with creaky floors and windows that let in too much light. The first morning, I stood by the sink, watching the sun spill across the counter, gilding the chipped edge of a mug. The silence wasn't heavy. It was alive, like a breath I'd forgotten how to take. I didn't need a garden to tend or a house to fill. I needed a space that asked nothing of me. Cassandra's letter arrived a week later, handwritten, postmarked from a town north of Portland. Elowen, she wrote, we were both lied to by the same man. I believed him when he said you were cold. I was wrong. You deserved better. So did I. I folded the letter, tucking it into my notebook behind pages of truths I was still learning to write. Her words didn't heal, but they settled something, like a stone smoothed by a river. I found the women's writing circle by accident, a flyer taped to a coffee shop window. Thursday evenings, no experience needed, I went carrying a notebook Roland had given me years ago, its pages mostly blank. 6 women sat around a folding table, their voices soft but unyielding, sharing stories of loss and defiance. I read a single line I'd written the night before. I built a home for others, but forgot to leave a room for myself. The room stilled, not with pity, but with recognition. A woman named Clara, her hair streaked with gray, touched my arm after. That's my life, she said, her eyes bright with her own betrayal. Keep writing. Nora visited that weekend, her tote bag slung over her shoulder, her camera dangling from her neck. She walked through the apartment, touching the walls like they held secrets. It's so you, Grandma, she said, smiling. We made tea, sat at the small table, and she told me about her photography class, her voice light but careful. I took a picture of you, she said, pulling out a print. Me, in the market, my back to the camera, my hand reaching for an apple. You look like you belong to yourself, she said. I held the photo, my throat tight. She was right. Clara from the writing circle invited me for coffee the next day. She'd lost her husband to a similar betrayal. A will rewritten, a secret kept. You don't rebuild, she said, stirring her lat. You start new. Her words stayed with me, a map for a road I was already walking. The apartment, the writing circle, Nora's quiet support. They were my new foundation, not a replacement, but a beginning. The courtroom was small, its fluorescent lights buzzing like trapped flies. I sat beside Tara, my hands folded, the gray coat I'd chosen simple, unadorned. Lila and Ethan sat across the room, their lawyer's voice sharp, accusing me of vindictiveness. I didn't flinch. Nora's recording, played for the judge, held their guilt. Lila's voice admitting they'd wronged me, Ethan's sigh confirming it. The trust was upheld. They left without a glance, their silence a final confession. Back home, I poured tea, the steam curling like a quiet promise. The apartment on Belmont felt lighter, its walls holding only my breath. I worked at the bakery now 3 mornings a week, handing out scones, remembering names, my pale pink apron a badge of my own making. No one knew me as Roland's wife, just Elowen, the woman with steady hands. The writing circle became my anchor, where I read truths I'd buried too long. I held up their lives. I wrote, but forgot to hold my own. Clara nodded, her own story echoing mine, and we laughed, not at pain but at survival. Nora's photo of me, hung at her school gallery, went viral online, captioned "Strength doesn't smile. It stands." Strangers commented, their words a chorus of women who'd been erased but found their voices. I booked a ticket to Savannah, a city I owed nothing to, its cobblestones waiting for my steps. I packed light, a coat, a dress, my notebook, the photos marked mine. The morning I left, I stood by the window, the river glinting below, and wrote, I am not what I lost. I am what I claimed. My life, once a shadow of others' needs, was now my own, sharp and clear. If you felt invisible, let this story find you. Share it with someone who needs to know they can stand again. Like, subscribe, and comment. When did you speak your truth? Your voice matters, just like mine did when I finally learned to say my own name.